I'm Dr. Katherine Horton, and I am back after a very, very long break that I spent working in the US. I have a very, very special guest to announce today. It is Bill Binney, who is here with me. So Bill and I, we have been working together for over a year now, right?
Yep.
So we have been working on trying to investigate the targeting crimes against us. We've tried to investigate directed energy weapons and chip torture, many, many things that we would like to talk about today. But I think we wanted to start the whole broadcast with one announcement. Bill, do you want to announce it?
Well, we're married.
We are married. So Bill and I are married, and what that means for the targeting community is that we will stick together, we will basically investigate together, and we'll try to get this whole targeting issue brought to a close. So this way we can work even closer together. We basically have been spending, I think, every waking moment just working on this problem one way or another. And we really would like to make some progress with the whole thing. So during the last year, I have to say that the last year since I've come to the US has been extremely hard, because as soon as Bill and I started working together, the attacks against us have basically just exploded in intensity. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, they started after we tried to get first the evidence of these chips and so on and implants. Then the torture and the pain was raised with me certainly, and I know with my wife certainly. She's been suffering every day with this kind of thing, and it's been going on day after day, and it's really been debilitating to a very extreme degree. I mean, it causes sleep deprivation, and when that happens, you have difficulty even functioning very well. So this has been pretty tough for us the last year.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I guess the other thing is also that I guess the very first time we met, and I told you based on what you were describing and the pain symptoms you had, I remember I said to you, I've got the feeling that you're implanted, right? And I think the very first time you heard it, I'm not sure, what did you think? I had the impression you couldn't quite believe it, right?
Well, I had a hard time. Yeah, I wanted to say, well, you know, I just thought this was a result of some of the operations. I had some of the like amputations and so on, and neuropathy. I thought that was part of it. And so then the only way to resolve it was to get some sort of forensic evidence from an X-ray or an MRI, both of which we've had now and have shown some things there. And actually tried to get some surgeons to remove some of that, and they wouldn't even consider doing it. So we tried 3 different surgeons, and they would not do that.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't really want to get involved, or they might be afraid of finding what they would find there.
Yeah.
I mean, then it would be difficult for them to continue with their practice, I guess. They were afraid of it.
Yeah, one of the I remember one of the surgeons we've contacted, that was really kind of mind-blowing for me, because the second surgeon we spoke to, who was we were handed from one surgeon to the next because nobody wanted anything to do with it. And the second surgeon we were passed to, at some point he even said to you, even if I take this out, the pain will not stop. And I looked at him and I said, how the hell do you know? Right? I said, do you know that there's more than one chip? And at that point he froze. He looked to the floor, and he couldn't. From that point onwards, he couldn't look me in the eyes anymore. And he said, oh, no, nothing like that, nothing like that. So shortly thereafter, indeed, Bill started having very asymptomatic, unnatural pain in his other leg. So up until then, it was basically one point pain, right, in your left leg.
On the left leg, left side of the left leg at the bottom, yeah.
And that's the location where later on an X-ray showed a foreign body.
Yep.
And then after that, shortly after this doctor said that, you started being pain tortured in the other leg, where you never had any pain before, right?
Yeah, well, it seemed to move over, and then it alternated between legs, back and forth between this, and even in one day, it would go from one to the other. One would start, then it stopped, then the other one started, and back and forth.
I guess since then you also had an incident where one pain flash would go into the left leg, then the right, and then left, right. So I think
kind of an unusual pain sequence, I would say, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess by now, I don't need to convince you that you are implanted by biotechnology.
Well, I just need to get it out. I mean, we need
Yeah.
to get in there and find out what that stuff is and get it out. I just haven't found a surgeon willing to do that.
Yeah, I guess, you know what, your experience is shared by all the victims who ever tried to have chips removed, even if they had scientific evidence that it is a chip, because I think we should also add other things that people can do. These are the different things that the scientific methods that I use to convince Bill that yes, indeed, it's a chip. So in the days when we were just beginning the investigation, Bill was very skeptical. He didn't really want to believe it. I guess you always say you don't want to believe that evil people like that even exist, right?
Well, it's hard to believe that people could be that evil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just difficult.
Yeah. And I guess with people, we also include doctors, right? Because
Everybody
at the end of the
seems to be.
day, it is doctors who implant this, not greengrocers, right?
I mean, you could take the psychiatrist to help develop the torture program for CIA as a part of that too.
Yeah.
So what's getting into them? Why would they do such an unethical thing?
Yeah, I guess, one psychologist said to me that when he was learning psychology, which wasn't that long ago, but even then he wasn't taught anything about psychopathy. And I think we're still just learning what psychopathy really is and what those people are truly capable of, because they have a different brain structure, completely different brain chemistry, and they just cannot feel any empathy or any remorse or even any sense of danger. And what would make us literally throw up with disgust just makes them laugh, and they just find it funny. So torturing somebody to death, they find amusing, and it would be just gut-wrenching to anybody else to witness such a thing. So I guess, this is still, the world is learning a lot that about things that have been with us for millennia and, millions of years, but we only now begin to understand what that actually really truly means. And then it's a genuine, brain degeneracy, It's not even an illness that can be cured. I mean, a psychopath is a psychopath for life, But anyway, so I guess the other thing that we should say is that when we first started out, the scientific things that we did to kind of find out, is this a chip or not? Number one is I brought my bug detector, and the very first measurement was we were trying to find if there was any emissions.
Right.
So one time we did not find any emissions, but during a pain torture session, I could actually show you that there was signals coming from your leg, from the area where the pain was coming from. And what happened is that shortly thereafter, my bug detector was sabotaged, and now I can't charge the device. So I cannot actually build up the charge, even if I leave it in the charger forever, to be able to do measurements. So basically that device was completely trashed. But after you witnessed this measurement, we moved on to the next thing. And the next thing was, I think that was the magnets, right?
Right.
So we had a huge industrial magnet on loan, and we figured out that by moving the magnets towards Bill's leg and not hitting Bill's leg or even touching it, just moving it towards his leg very rapidly, we could induce the pain, right?
Yep.
So what that means, this is because magnetic fields cannot induce any pain in the human body. This is why MRIs are completely painless, thank goodness. But because magnetic fields cannot induce any pain in the human body, this is direct proof of microcircuitry inside Bill's leg causing the pain, because magnets can induce an electric current in wires, and actual little, metal wires, copper wires, right? When you induce that current, if that current is then, or the electrical pulse that it generates is then passed into the nervous system, and if it then mimics the body's pain signal, you will feel pain. And that's exactly what happened with Bill. We could reproduce that moving a magnet very rapidly towards his leg caused that pain sensation. The first thing we did is we had an industrial magnet that was roughly this big and weighed a ton. So for me to do the experiment and move it towards your leg was kind of terrifying. It was,
a muscle there,
It was quite hard. And then what we did is we did a second test. I should actually bring them here for the next video and show it. We used neodymium magnets. These are tiny, tiny magnets that are very small, but have an incredible, magnetic force behind them. So the magnetic energy stored in these is quite substantial. So if you put a lot of magnets together, you amplify the field, and we put all these neodymium magnets together, and that we moved rapidly towards the pinpoint.
Again, it caused pain, yeah.
Again, it caused the pain. But what's also unusual, which is what really disturbed doctors, is that you don't have pain in a general area of your leg. You have a point pain.
It's a point pain, yeah. It's not a moving pain. It's a point pain. It's the same pain on the left side of at the bottom of the left side of my left stump. And so, it's the one that's there almost every day. So
yeah, and maybe some people don't know, but Bill is a double amputee. We'll get into how he got to lose both of his legs in a bit. But so what he means by stump is his amputated below the knee amputated leg. So I suspect, based on the evidence that I've seen, that Bill was implanted during the amputations of his legs. So they loaded his legs with chips, like they loaded mine. I know quite precisely where my chips are, because during a torture session, they heated the chips to burn my flesh from the inside. During that torture session, I put ice on my leg to cool it down, took off the ice, and then the actual points where this incredible heat was coming from was the location of the chips. So I have photographs or thermal images that literally show a dozen chips just in my right knee. So I suspect that Bill has probably the same number or, a comparable order of chips. So that means that the chip that is mostly used to torture you, which is a unique chip, one of them, always the same location 99% of the time, is just one out of many. Yeah. And that's exactly what then later on turned out to be the case when they changed to the other leg. They even changed to different location.
I think over time, I've probably had about 6 points in my legs, in both legs, 3 in each leg, I think, that have shown up.
Yeah, I think
so far that's about all I've experienced to this date anyway.
Yeah, but I guess also the revelation of all these other pin pains and all of these point pains, the revelation that they can cause pain with that came gradually, and it came after we obtained evidence in form of an X-ray that you have a foreign body in your leg.
Yeah, some of it was kind of excruciating pain too. It was pretty. It really got pretty bad after that X-ray. Also in the MRI, I think it's showed up some things too that we need to look at. So
yeah.
So we need to find somebody who's willing to address it for us.
I guess so what actually happened, there's other more circumstantial evidence. Well, I say circumstantial, it's smoking gun evidence really, but you have to document it very carefully. One of the smoking gun pieces of evidence is that the pain usually starts exactly the moment you decide to go to sleep, right?
Or very shortly thereafter, yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, in the beginning, when you switched off the lights to go to bed, the pain started moments after you switching off the lights, completely independent of the hour of the night. Then later on, you began sleeping with the lights on to see if somebody was looking into the house or looking at the window of when the light is being switched on, and then turning on by remote control the pain torture. And then we figured out that actually people were monitoring you pretty much live and very precisely, with precise knowledge of when you were in the bedroom with the lights on, the exact moment you decided to go to sleep.
Really seemed that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, of course, when the pain starts, literally moments after you switch off the lights or moments after you decide to go to sleep with the lights on, right? That is direct evidence that somebody is messing with you, because natural pain occurs on its own cycle, not natural cycle, not, when it's correlated. Or it occurs when you maybe sit down in a certain position, if you have maybe a spinal problem, but when it's completely independent of the position you sit or lie in or the time of the day, but it's actually correlated with a very specific activity. And the other thing I should say also is that when the pain starts, it goes from 0 to excruciating, right? So that's also not normal pain. You don't have, kind of dull aches for weeks on end. No, you have basically, you're perfectly fine. Then you decide to go to sleep, even though you've been lying in bed for quite some time in the same position, and then boom, excruciating pain that even the strongest painkillers can't block out anymore. So that's not normal. So then the pain would go throughout the night for about 6 to 8 hours, right? I measured like how long does the pain actually last, excruciating pain. So you're kept awake for the time that a normal human being would sleep on average. So 6 to 8 hours. This is the length of these torture sessions. So it is 100% sleep deprivation. So
that's right. I mean, and it really destroys the rest of your day too, because you're up and tired, and sometimes you just take a nap and it just flips your entire day around.
Yeah, so you become night active. You can't be there during the day and do your activities, do work or anything. So when I noticed that, and we made a schedule of when it actually started, it to me strikingly looked like exactly the torture, CIA torture, for example, the one that was developed by these psychiatrists. And it's basically the CIA's version of Zersetzung, as it was practiced. Zersetzung is a German word meaning disintegration. That's what the German, East German Stasi called their program of torture. And this was called Zersetzung, the complete disintegration of a person's health, well-being, mental well-being, recovery time, and so on. So sleep deprivation torture is the staple torture method of the secret services. So it very much looks like CIA sort of intel agency sort of torture, doesn't it? So when we had all of these ducks in a row and we went and had this x-ray, I think by now, do you have any doubt that you're implanted with biotechnology?
No, but I need to get it out to verify and validate it for courts and so on, so that people know what they're dealing with here. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's something there that needs to come out, period.
Yeah. I guess there's one more thing to say about that. Why is it so incredibly difficult to get this stuff out? I mean, you would think that if you know exactly the point where the pain is, you could just go in, cut it out, and be done with it. Now, the thing is that doctors are very reluctant to go in and cut out something that they can't see, okay? Because they would always say, okay, if I open it up, how can I find it? What am I looking for? Now, the answer to that is actually the following. When we did an X-ray, we saw one foreign body that was quite large, right? An unexplained object, a foreign body. And that is exactly at the site where you have felt this odd pain in your left leg for many, many years.
Yep.
But, later on, we figured out you had more chips in your legs, but those chips do not show up in the same way on the X-ray. Why is that? And that is because the resolution of an X-ray is much larger than the size of these chips that are being used for the pain torture, usually, especially with the modern technology that got implanted, since the beginning of the 21st century. So what that means in practice is that what you see on an X-ray is not the chip. You see calcified tissue that calcified around the chip. The longer the chip is radiating and inflaming the tissue, the bigger the calcification shell that the body builds to protect itself around it. So what we really saw on the X-ray, I presume, is actually the calcification shell. That can be very large. The longer and the more intensively you're being tortured and electrocuted and irradiated by that chip, the bigger the calcification shell. But on an MRI, as soon as there's microcircuitry, there has to be some sort of ferrous material, unless they have really done some amazing new things in solid state physics, right? So there has to be some sort of tiny, tiny wiring, no matter how small. And what that means in practice is that you have some ferrous material that is conducting. And as soon as you have ferrous material, it shows up on an MRI like a Christmas tree.
And can be affected by magnets and so on.
Exactly, right? And that would explain the magnet results that we obtained. But because an MRI is actually measuring the spin of the atoms that are, or rather the nuclei that are in the different materials in the body, ferrous materials show up like a little, blinking, or rather like an intense little light on a Christmas tree, right? You can see it from miles. So on an MRI, it really shows up. But then on an MRI, you have a lot of shadow effects. You have maybe artifacts. And for many, many years, doctors, I presume, have explained away chips because they didn't know that people got non-consensually implanted. they explained them away as artifacts. And it is quite hard to say to a radiologist, no, please highlight everything that you can't explain, and don't just, assume, oh, this is a shadow, this is that, this is that, this is that. No, you actually have to scientifically prove, is this an artifact or is it not? For example, by taking a second MRI with a different machine on a different day, does it show the same artifact? If it does, it's not an artifact. It is actually something that's in the body. It is, it's intrinsic to the person, to the data set that you took. It's not intrinsic to the machine taking the data. So there we are. But we have now an X-ray and an MRI, and that shows that we have got magnet tests. We have bug detector tests showing that radio frequency or high frequency electromagnetic radiation is coming out of your leg. So that settles it, right? So we have the evidence together. Now, the other stuff that we've been, especially I have been struggling with, where we also have now some new results, is the directed energy weapon attacks. So there I have been.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here listening to all these impacts in the house that I've never heard before. So, I mean, this house has been, I've lived here for 33 years and not heard these kinds of impacts. So, and the impacts have been hitting. We put up some shielding and they've been hitting the shielding, and I hear it on the shielding, metal whiteboards, so on. And you can see, we can hear the impacts on those, and we've got dents in them as well, and also some holes that were penetrated, I think, in 2 cases.
Yeah, it was actually 2 holes that were shot into the shielding on one occasion. The shielding was placed on the floor above the floor where we were sleeping, so it was basically over our heads, above the ceiling, and the shots, which I know, and I can show people how I know, but these shots are pulsed energy projectiles. They are fired from directed energy weapons, and those 2 pulsed energy projectile shots were so violent they actually shot 2 holes into shielding, one after the other. It literally went bang, bang, and we heard the actual impact sound, and we heard the metal, the hole being shot in the hole being shot into metal on the floor below. Right, it actually woke us up.
Yeah, I mean, they're not massive holes, but they're pinpoint holes. But the fact is that it penetrated and made those holes. That's the big deal. Yeah. I mean, that's the significance of it.
The other significance is that the holes were made into the metal and not into the roof and the ceiling above us.
That's right.
Right. So what it means is that dense material absorbs this energy from pulsed energy projectiles, and less dense material kind of moves with it. Yeah. A bit like, reeds survive a hurricane because they move with the hurricane. But if you have a solid fence, the hurricane just, breaks the fence and breaks the siding of a house like it was, just built from matchsticks. But
it's like saying resistance is futile.
Yeah, resistance is futile. The more you resist the pulse and the shock wave of a pulsed energy projectile, the more it destroys. What that means in practice is that it actually matches up quite well with observations that victims had. For example, that these pulsed energy projectiles would destroy their bones. That's because the bones are very rigid, porous material. It would shatter under the impact of a pulsed energy projectile, where soft tissue around it, if the shock wave is of a certain nature, would maybe not even be damaged that much. So it can go through soft tissue. It means that you don't have any injuries on your skin or in the soft tissue, but your bones can be shattered by these pulsed energy projectiles. Now, the 2 shots that shot, the holes into the metal shielding, if you're shot in the head by one of them, I think that's instantly lethal. And certainly it would crack your skull and blow a little hole into your brain, I think.
Certainly it would be damaging of some sort, to a degree. You just couldn't, I would assume that it would penetrate the skull.
Yeah, and then it's just up to the exact waveform of what exactly happens to the brain, but the skull, certainly I think that would crack it. But anyway, so it was terrifying stuff like that is being shot at us in our house. I hope people can see us. Do we both fit into the image? I can push it back a bit.
I think we are.
So I guess other things that we were investigating were also bioweapon attacks. And that's very important for your case because you lost both legs in independent flesh-eating bacterial infections.
About 8 different infections, yeah.
So
over what, 12 years.
Yeah. So have you ever heard of anybody getting a flesh-eating bacterial infection? And if you have, how out of those people who had flesh-eating bacterial infections, how many have lost a limb? And out of those who've lost a limb, how many have lost 2 limbs? And out of those who lost 2 limbs, how many had a total of 8 flesh-eating bacterial infections, right? So when you actually look at the statistics, and this is, by the way, so statistics is usually considered to be very poor when it's, quoted by the government and by many statistical, agencies even run by the government. However, in the hard sciences, real statistics, that the mathematical, actually tool set of statistics is extremely powerful and is actually underpinning every single scientific result ever made. So any measurement at CERN, the discovery of the Higgs boson is reliant on these very powerful statistical tools, and people have to know how to use them. If like any tool, bullshit in, bullshit out, right? So if you misuse these tools, you get nonsense. However, if you do the analysis correctly, what you're doing, if you want to see if something is unusual, right, you're comparing your expectation under random process to, is this statistically probable or not? And there I must say that the statistical likelihood of what happened to you is just so tiny that your case is a total outlier. However, in reverse,
not counting some of the other things that have been going on, like accidents in automobiles that are mine, that are being driven by my sons. It's like 5 accidents over the last 2 years.
Yeah, one of which was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's another thing. So if you think, Bill, if you make the hypothesis Bill lost his legs under random chance, really, really bad luck, random chance, and he was just unlucky that by random chance he got, so many flesh-eating bacterial infections. Well, once you have one, the next one is much more unlikely. The third one is even more unlikely. Just like when you throw dice, you can throw a 6. And then you can also throw 2 6s in a row. But when you throw, 8 6s, 8 times a 6 in a row, that's what I mean. When you throw a 6 8 times in a row, you start to think, hang on, couldn't it be that these dice are kind of, tampered with? They're somehow, what is it called?
They're fixed.
They're fixed. Yeah. Your dice is fixed. So in this case, I think Bill's dice were fixed by the fact that, after his whistleblowing, the intel agencies launched bioweapon attacks on him. So that is
first they tried the FBI with a raid, and then the Department of Justice was attempting to indict us 3 separate times on these espionage acts. And they simply fabricated evidence. They lied to the court. They lied in affidavits. I mean, it was just... it was really pathetic. And the difference is the only reason we didn't go to jail is because I caught them at their lies. And I told them what their lies were, and I was going to charge them with it when they took us to court, and they ran away.
Yeah.
But that's the only reason. But then this other stuff starts,
So I guess, what I'm trying to say is that the statistical likelihood for random chance is basically fuck all. But the statistical likelihood of these sort of things happening to somebody who is a victim of the intel agencies is actually extremely high based on the affidavits that I've collected. So when you enter the targeting program, I can prove with the other affidavits that I have collected and I have published on my website, and I can take you there, that it is in fact a standard operating procedure of the intelligence agencies that anybody they don't like, they will start breaking into homes. They will start attacking them with directed energy weapons. They will implant them with non-consensual implants without their knowledge. They will start to torture them. They will start to launch bioweapon attacks, hacking, sabotage of their homes, attack family members, boom, 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 like a program. So on one hand, all these things happening to you are impossible to occur by random chance based on the statistical likelihoods. But for all of these things to occur in series, the probability is almost 100% if you're an intel victim.
Yeah, but I think we're not standing by and doing nothing about this. We should start telling them what we've been doing about it.
That's right, because I think many people are in this sort of situation, and it can be overwhelming, right?
Oh, I mean, it is. It's very debilitating too. I mean, it's a problem even being able to do anything, function normally is difficult. So, but in the process, though, we were able to put together police reports. We even filed complaints with the Department of Justice and Department of Defense, their Inspector General's offices, and also the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, about a drone, because we have a device called an HF-35C that gives you some semblance of direction of arrival of the signals or pulses, even if they're in the zone of coverage, which in this case is 2 to 4 gigahertz.
It's 800 megahertz to 2.7 gigahertz.
2.7 gig. Okay. Yeah. So if there's a pulse energy signal that has some frequencies in that band, it'll pick that up too. So, and in the process, we've been getting directions that are pointing above our house for these pulses coming in, and also other kinds of energies that we can detect with it. And in some of the cases, we can see that it looks like it's running a pattern of a figure of 8, which a drone would do, or a coverage aircraft doing collection would do. If it wants to hover over a certain area and stay in place, it'll make a figure 8 pattern up above it so it can stay in place and view that area constantly. So that's there. And also we had some of our neighbors have told us that some of their children have said they've seen a drone above our house, or above in the area of our house. So
that was during the day when
it
the
was
kids
during
were
the day,
out.
yeah.
Whereas at night when we were out, one time attacks were particularly violent, and we went outside to actually look for a drone. I should say that these drones are camouflaged, so they don't just levitate over your house or do a figure of 8 above your house and are just clearly visible. They are camouflaged, and at night they're camouflaged as stars. So they are perfectly stationary, like a star. And unless you continually compare your night sky towards a star chart, you will not spot this. But we looked for a particularly bright, light source that looks like a star above our house, and then we spotted one that was right above our house, and it was basically shining white and then shining red, alternating. So that for us was smoking gun evidence of a drone doing the sort of flight path, and I think we suspected that that particular drone couldn't be completely camouflaged, because we're actually fairly close to an airport. So if you are in the flight path of any big aircraft, a civilian aircraft taking off and landing, you can't be completely hidden from you. I suspect that there's some sort of agreement between the military and the airport. Now, what I find absolutely outrageous, though, is that we notified the FAA several months ago by now. They had an investigator on this case to look into this case. Nobody came out here and took measurements. Then the FAA wanted to tell us that they are completely incapable of buying a spectrum analyzer, which you can, I think the ones we're using, you can get for under $500, so about $300 or something. So $300 is probably completely within the means of the FAA if it's about saving civilian lives who are being gunned to death by a drone, right? So yes, they said they couldn't buy a measuring device, and also they didn't have the expertise how to use one. Now that, unfortunately, is complete bullshit, because I think I taught many, many housewives and single mothers, right, who were looking after kids full time, how to use a spectrum analyzer and how to find directed energy weapon attacks. So the fact that the FAA staff with all of their experts, a federal agency is incapable of this, I just really fail to believe.
Yeah, it should have been a major problem for them to use petty cash to get something like that. So
petty cash, and maybe requisition some expertise from anybody, from the private sector or the military. It's really not hard, people.
No, they could do that.
Yeah. So as we stand now, the FAA has done absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, we have several spectrum analyzers, and one we are monitoring the full spectrum that we can measure. And we have noticed that we are being blasted day and night with military frequencies.
We should first state that we are referring to and I think you're going to show it, the FCC table frequency allocations. In other words, anybody broadcasting a frequency inside the United States or zone 2 of the world, which includes the United States and North America and South America. Zone 1 is Europe, most of Europe, and I think part of Africa. Anybody who wants to request a frequency for use in that has to pass it through the FCC, where they can guarantee that this frequency will be assigned to you or allocated for your use, so that and within a given range, so that you can use that frequency within that distance and not interfere with other people. And the big thing is to make it possible for multiple people, civilians, military, government, any departments of government, and so on, be able to communicate effectively in the environment without interfering with one another. So, but they have certain regulations that say, okay, we went through the FCC table, which you can too, because we'll show you the link and you can look at it. And just Google military, and you'll see the different bands that were assigned for military use throughout the spectrum. That runs up to 275 gigahertz. And above 275 gigahertz, they have not really allocated yet. But below that, you can have allocations to military for use, and also separate ones for space to Earth communications and Earth to space, because again, that's got to be coordinated worldwide so that they don't interfere with one another, because if people start putting up satellites without coordinating the frequencies they're using, they can easily interfere with each other. So there's those agreements, and they clearly define who is allowed to use what bands of the spectrum. And that's all in that table. If you could pull it.
I'm going to pull it up and I'll show people how to find it. Let me just share my screen.
And also separate ones for space to Earth communications and Earth to space, because again, that's got to be coordinated.
Okay,
worldwide,
somewhere
so
the YouTube.
They don't interfere with one another, because if people start putting up satellites without
here, okay. I realized what happened in the background. This started playing here.
They can easily interfere with.
Okay, so I'm pleased to see that now the YouTube is up and people can hear us. So that's really good. Okay, so now let me share my screen. Excuse the brief interruption for a moment. I didn't know what just happened here. But let me share the screen and show you where you can find this table. Hang on, share screen. Okay, here we are. Okay, so what you can do is you can go to your favorite search engine and type in FCC table of frequency allocations. And here's the fcc.gov website. So this is one of the links. This is the second link that came up here. Here's the table of frequency allocations, right? You can read more about it, but there's a quicker way to get to the actual table. If you go back to the online search, the very first link, which is a PDF. So if I click on it, it automatically downloads in the way I have this set up. It is at https://transition.fcc.gov and then OET spectrum FCC table. Okay, that is the link. You can see it in the bottom of the screen here that I've shared. But now I would like to show you the actual PDF document. So let me share the screen. This is what you get if you download that file. This is what it looks like. It's the FCC online table, frequency allocations. This is revised 1st of February 2021. So this is the newest edition here. And then when you go down, you can see the frequency allocation. It starts from 0 to 137.8 kilohertz. But if you go up in the table, I have to start scrolling, the top bar, you will see all these different frequency allocations.
275 gigahertz.
Exactly. So it's here, for example, it goes here. I'm now at 150.8 to 174 megahertz, this thing, right? And it goes all the way up. Now, the way to read it is that the left-hand side is the international table. This little section here between the two double bars, vertical bars, is the United States table. And then here is the FCC rules that maybe apply as well. Now, one of the things that Bill would like to draw your attention to, I hope you can see this little find bar here. If you search for electronic warfare, a certain frequency will show up. This is now in the comments. At the end of the tables, there's a long section of comments. And this is comment US 91, okay, about the band of 1,755 to 1,780 megahertz, right? In this section, if you keep reading, point C will be in the band 175 to 170 megahertz. The military services may conduct electronic warfare operations. on federal ranges and within associated airspace on a non-interference basis with respect to non-federal AWS operations, and shall not constrain non-federal AWS operations, right? This use is restricted to research, development, test and evaluation, training, and large force exercise operations. Now, the thing is that research and development is typically what is used to hide human experimentation, right? And also covert torture of victims. So research and development, listen up when that's mentioned in connection with electronic warfare. But I would really encourage all victims who have spectrum analyzers to start looking for this frequency specifically.
And keep in mind, this is a line of sight frequency range.
Line of sight, we should explain that to those who are not experts. Line of sight means that whoever is beaming this frequency at you has a direct line of sight onto you. Right? Certain frequencies pass through, for example, a brick wall, but not 5 brick walls in it, any meaningful intensity. So if you have a very intense signal, it is line of sight. Maybe it went through 1 brick wall, as in it's coming from a next door neighbor or something through a brick wall, but it hasn't come through several buildings. Okay. So in other words, whoever is emitting this or is beaming it at you, as may be the case, is directly next to you. Okay, so it's somewhere in your immediate surroundings or above you, or maybe even under you in a hidden tunnel, potentially if the tunnel is not very high. So maybe if you're in a block of flats, it could come from the neighbor below you. So you have to do some sort of directional analysis. Where's the intensity the highest, right? But what is not a direct line of sight signal? Those are those particularly long wave signals that can be bounced off the ionosphere. So they can be just broadcast into the, into the ether by some broadcasting station. They bounce off the ionosphere and they can be received also on the other side of the earth, or maybe somewhere off, in Moscow. So that is not direct line of sight, but these frequencies are direct line of sight, right? So anything that falls into it. This is why, for example, you need to have a direct line of sight, or at least somewhere not be too far away from your Wi-Fi router. It can be separated from you by 1 brick wall or maybe by a floor, but you can't be somewhere, in the basement of a high rise or something. And you can't also be on the other side of your neighborhood and still have your own Wi-Fi signal. This is why. Okay. So there we are. So these are the things that we've been measuring. We talked about the drone, the measurements. And as I said, as far as we're concerned, we're being beamed by one military frequency or another continuously, day and night.
Yes, and we have a record of those, and we will be documenting that soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, I guess we're trying to survive the attacks, because as far as I'm concerned, I know who this is, right? This is not a miracle, so it's not exactly, nobody will be shocked when I say this, but the US military and the US Secret Services have been gunning my head day and night since I came to the US. So during the night, I survive extremely intense battery. They are gunning through several layers of shielding with something that I'm fairly confident that is novel physics. I have some measurements that indicate that quite strongly. So in other words, I'm being battered and bruised up. You saw a couple of very large bruises that they caused with continuous gunning while, I was trying to just rest and recover. So it's really, really hard to survive this. And this is also why we haven't been putting out these shows, because I think you and I, we are physically exhausted. We had very, very heavy injuries. You had bioweapon attacks to deal with. There's nonstop stuff when it's not physical assaults that are more crippling than usual. Because the truth is, I wake up every day with my bones battered, and these people try to destroy my joints quite systematically. When it's not that, it's any sabotage of the house. We had everything. We had mysterious roof leaks. We had the flooding of the basement that strikingly looked like somebody just poured several buckets of water into the basement. We had other stuff. Yep. That we will be documenting. I will be documenting in my court case. But yes, so I guess what we really want the targeting community and the wider world to understand is that we're not being lazy. We're not off on a, multi-year honeymoon here. We
No.
were off on, trying to work.
And what we're doing is based in scientific investigation. We'll have specifics and information and measurements and so on with devices that are reputable, and you could use them to replicate the experience anywhere in the world.
Yeah. And I guess what we really want to stand for is very high scientific and forensic standards here. But I'm also sad to say that, this was to be expected, but it's still kind of sad and shocking when it actually happens and it hits you. Because when we teamed up and started working systematically, there was basically one defamation campaign after the other, specifically targeted at me, I think, because I'm the less known person.
Yeah.
And let's face it, I'm not a man, so people can batter me quite freely here. But it's true. Yeah. It's true. But, the things that, for example, there was one incident where there were allegations by one person who had never met me before. And after we didn't even talk for an hour. You had a meeting with that person for 1 hour, and immediately after that meeting, without ever having really met me or talked to me or had any knowledge of my work or what I did and what we worked on together, there were allegations immediately after the meeting that I was poisoning you, I think. And those,
I think you were going to poison me or something.
Yeah, but I think these allegations were made several times. And then a couple of months later, it was that I did poison you or something.
Yeah, but that was just bizarre. Silliness.
Well, it was silliness, but these were basically defamatory allegations that were made to you and also to
these were made by other people who had no knowledge of what was really going on. And they simply, for whatever reason, allege certain things just to discredit you and to basically cause a problem for us.
Yeah, well, without evidence.
Yeah, with no evidence whatsoever.
Yeah. And so this was one thing. Bill, did you have ever any reason to think I'm poisoning you?
No, you make a mean salad, but that's okay. I didn't have a problem with the mean salads.
You're more into steaks, right?
Yeah, I like steaks. So.
Oh yes, apart from the European versus American, lunch habits, right? So that's the thing. And there were other allegations. Gosh, there was one set of allegations was particularly hilarious. I found was the allegation that I'm an MI5 honeypot. Now that one really cracked me up because, to my knowledge, I think I'm the first woman ever to have taken MI5, MI6, and GCHQ to court by myself. And I think the stuff that I revealed in the court case, including directed energy weapons, and now I'm talking publicly about non-consensual implanting by MI5 and MI6, and mind control experimentation, systematic murder in the UK and abroad. I don't think that's what honeypots usually do.
No, and at the time you had a number of people supporting your lawsuit with submitted affidavits to support that in your court case.
Yeah, that was in 2019. In 2016, the first time I sued them, I was on my own.
Yeah.
I was on my own. So, I don't know. Is that what honeypots do in your experience of the Cold War? That Russian, what was her name? Nope. Chapman, the woman who, I think she photographed herself in lingerie. She didn't put out YouTube videos about how evil the KGB and the CIA are, right? So
no, that was just it was just false allegations by people who didn't want us doing what we're doing. That's all.
Yeah. I think, usually in my experience, when they really go ballistic is when you do scientific measurements. They hated that. They hated the scientific measurements in Belgium. They sabotaged my car when I did the measurements in the Paul Scherrer Institute with the scientists there who were trying to investigate the implant and take those measurements there. So they absolutely hated that. But they also absolutely loathe when people team up and actually work together trying to put a stop to this. I remember that stuff blew up the very first time, the day after the very first time I met Katherine Horton. I think she's an absolutely amazing person. You know her also very well. She did an interview with her. She's absolutely amazing. And I think we really support her work, all the way, the financial work she does. And she talks about all these crimes as well, extensively about murder by the intelligences, directed energy weapons. She talks a lot about neurotechnology, actually. And she's also interested in the companies that fund this whole thing, because she knows very well, being an expert on Wall Street, that, there's a huge corporate infrastructure behind all this. So I really encourage people to follow her. There are other people who have done amazing work in the past. And I guess we're very keen on linking up with them. Those are people with decades of track records exposing everything from geoengineering to, you know, other crimes in the judicial area and so on. But those are people who basically stand for something, stand for integrity, and continue decade after decade, you know?
Yeah, and you should note that the the budgets that are being spent on directed energy weapons are increasing tens of billions of dollars every year.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, this is not cheap stuff, and it's not something that, I mean, there's over 100 patents, I think, that are related to that already.
Yeah, to directed energy weapons, as well as neurotechnology and other nefarious stuff, that all of which ties together. Absolutely. So, yeah, so these are basically the things that we are working on. And basically, I guess what we wanted to say is that we just wish that before people put out any defamatory allegations, they maybe ask us or provide some evidence, maybe. And, you know, for those people who are in doubt of who to believe, why don't you just take it from us first? Like everything that concerns us or how we feel or what we do, right?
Or check the links that we'll give you to investigate the bands of assignments and any other things that we're picking up, and use devices if you can afford to get them, use the devices that we're using to try to detect these things.
Yeah, at this stage, I basically would like to share my screen and take people to the website where I've already uploaded all the all the devices that I'm using and that we're using right now. This has been made public absolutely years and years ago, and it's no secret whatsoever. So let me share my screen. We just wish that more people would join into the scientific investigations and try to systematically pin down what is being done and how. So let me share my screen and take you to my website, stop007.org. If this is what the website looks like, it's still up. So if it doesn't show up for you, it's being sabotaged, but it's https:// stop007.org. All right, so there we are. If you scroll down here to equipment and detection, you will see a long list of everything that I'm using here. And under measurements, you can find the this little device I really recommend because it goes up to 8 gigahertz, fits into every, you know, a lady's purse, and you can take it everywhere. I wouldn't even get this super expensive one. I would stick with the cheaper version. This I recommend. The other one I really recommend is this one. This is the HF35C you've mentioned. This is excellent at picking out pulsed energy projectiles, but it cannot give you the full intensity of pulsed energy projectiles because, as I said before, I suspect that they're based on novel physics and novel waveforms. And one day when I have more time, we'll talk about what the evidence for that is. So this is a device for $300 to $450, easily within the reach of the FAA, right?
Sure, yeah.
The Federal Aviation Agency in the US. Then the other one I recommend is this HF4040 and all its newer versions here. And actually the device does really well without this dolphin antenna. So even if you just buy the handheld device, the dolphin tail here, this handheld antenna comes separately, but even without it, this little handheld device is an absolute jewel. And it also comes with software where you can read out its results on a computer.
It is specific frequencies.
Exactly. You can look at frequencies. The old version went from 100 megahertz to 4 gigahertz. These days, the newer devices go to 8 gigahertz. And I wholeheartedly recommend it to everybody. Maybe one day we can also put out a training course of how to use these devices and how we use them. But in a sense, who should be interested in this and what we're talking about? I guess everybody who's ever worked for a federal agency or their European or other equivalents around the world. Why? Because just like the Cuban embassies and the diplomats in Moscow back in the 70s, you too are probably in the direct line of fire at some point in your career.
Well, when these devices are used, we're not the only ones radiated, okay? Everybody in the area of the beams are being radiated. Either if they're not directly in line, they could be getting a ricochet or something of that nature.
Or reflection,
So, I mean, the point is that this is radiating more than just us.
Yeah. I guess also later on, we'll talk about the fact that in your immediate vicinity, in the neighboring houses, in your street, there is an extremely high death rate that is 100% female.
And almost all of it's cancer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So 100% cancer death rate, and it's 100% female. So the cancer death rate isn't 100% the death rate, but it's the people who died are all women. Now, you know, women on average live longer than men. So this is a complete statistical outlier again. Yep. And it affects the immediate surrounding houses. So that's one thing. There's many other forms of sabotage that can affect the entire area that we can talk about. But you know, this is one thing, but what's very important to realize is if you have maybe retired from a federal agency, you can still be pulled back as a guinea pig. People like to experiment on their former employees. Also, if you are a judge, if you are a lawyer, especially if you're a commercial lawyer, actually, because there's so much money involved in the litigation. So people can use these energy devices to access you, to disable your brain, to affect your brain, to interfere with your brain in many ways, or to just blatantly take you out. So that's very important. But also there's a lot of single mothers that are being experimented on. So in other words, if you are very important and famous or rich, you might be targeted because you're important, famous, or rich. If you're very poor, you might be targeted because you are very poor and you basically can't get yourself a lawyer to defend yourself. So everybody in the world is affected. I guess that's the answer. Bill was, he's the former technical director of the NSA. I suspect that he's being targeted because he's a whistleblower. I am not a whistleblower. I have never blown the whistle on any of my employers. I became targeted, and then I started investigating the University of Oxford and what they really were. And I gave lectures on that, but I'm not really a whistleblower. So when I was targeted, I was an oblivious little scientist, just, you know, being all skippity-doo-dah throughout my day at Oxford, and I had no idea what was going on. So anybody could be a target. So please wisen up about these things. If you have reason to believe that you might be implanted because you have odd pain sensations, or you think that you're being assaulted by a directed energy weapon, chances are you might be. So please get yourself measuring devices, start using them. All the devices I'm listing, or maybe with the exception of the HF4040, are basically idiot-proof to use, okay? If you've never measured anything before in your life, you can use these things. They have 2 or 3 buttons, and it's right? Would you agree?
On, off, and volume.
Yeah, you're a mathematician and not a physicist, but you use.
I like simple things like buttons. Just fewer buttons, the better.
Exactly, and they're very easy to use. So please get in there and start learning what these signals are, and look at the FCC table, and never think that this stuff is so complex that you can never understand it. In fact, I think most of the things are very, very simple indeed, you know, and once you start looking, you'll be amazed what you'll find. All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to say?
Not in this one, this broadcast. I think we've done an adequate job of covering the points I think we wanted to make.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we can go on forever about a lot of other corruption that goes on around the world, and we will do so. Yep. But I guess this is meant to be a weekly show that we do from now on, talking about the investigations that we have. Hopefully, if we're not being assaulted. We are very sorry about the many months of silence, but they were basically due to the attacks on us. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I really struggled to cope.
Well, I do too. So
yeah. So there we are. Okay, so this is from everything from us for now. If you can reach out to the mainstream media, please do. You can share this video far and wide. Both of us are public about these attacks and have been working on these things for quite some time. So yes, please help us, support us. Do your own investigations, cross-check everything that we're putting out online, do your own measurements, check the FCC tables, and cross-check everything that we say. And please do your own investigations as well and help us fight this crime.
Yep. Trust but verify.
Trust but verify, that's it. So yes, I hope that this will be a new series with many, many new episodes to come. And yes, hope to see you soon. Next week or earlier maybe.
Yeah.